portfolio. Advice from 1998. Pew. Okay. Welcome. Welcome. I've got Hope your Friday is going well. I have 2 hours to myself. I am kid-free. And like every parent, the most valuable thing you can do with your time when you have no children is to do something like reading because there are no interruptions. So, I'm going to read something. The advice and everything that I read is from 1998. It's about the comic book industry from that time. Some of the information and advice is useful, and some of it is super outdated. I will try not to have a giggle fit, but there are no guarantees because once I get started, I don't stop. So, let me open it to La Page. Business of Comics by Lorraine Haynes, Chapter 1, Preparing a Professional Portfolio. Oh, saludos. Hey, Solid. I'm going to start reading now, so I'm going to go into my reading voice. In this chapter, we're going to look at an important and very concrete step on the road to working in the comic industry, preparing a professional portfolio. We're going to look at just what a portfolio is and why it is important in your search for employment, as well as all the different factors to consider when you prepare a professional portfolio. Just what is a portfolio? A portfolio is an organized display of samples of work published and or unpublished. For artists, there are a variety of professional portfolio cases available from art or office supply shops. However, a portfolio can take the form of an ordinary binder with page inserts, a scrapbook with copies and originals mounted on the pages, or even a neatly organized sketchbook. The pages can be displayed in loose form, but it is recommended that they be anchored and protected for safety's sake, particularly in the case of original art. The most important feature of the portfolio is that the work is organized and easy to examine. For writers, it is important that their sample written work represents brief, concise examples of their writing. A portfolio is not as important for a writer as samples, which I will discuss later in this chapter. Why do I need one? Many aspiring professionals, and sometimes even established pros, come to conventions or approach publishers and editors with a set of loose originals or samples in hand, hoping to find work by showing their wares. Sometimes they are just looking for critiques. Unfortunately, this method is often one reason these individuals are unable to get work. To an interested editor or publisher, a disorganized ragtag collection of work represents an inexperienced and unprofessional employee. It would be the same as showing up for a butcher's job with a bag full of miscellaneous steaks and chops from the last job. Pretty weird, and not too impressive. By taking the simple first step of organizing your work in an easy-to-scan, eye-pleasing display, you make it effortless for potential employers to examine your work and also prove your ability to be organized and professional. There are a variety of methods for presenting your work and several different ways that you can use this portfolio to promote yourself. But one thing is certain. If you're serious about acquiring professional employment, then you must prepare a portfolio right away. Not later when you've completed some dreamed of volume or project. You'll never achieve it in time, and you'll always be procrastinating. Nor should you wait until after you've reached the level of satisfaction with your work for which you ultimately aim. That is a distant, ever-changing goal you should always be reaching for. Do it now, right now. If you feel your work isn't satisfactory, then now is not the time to approach employers. continue your education or practicing. When you're more satisfied, then prepare your portfolio and search for employment. Publishers don't hire aspiring professionals on spec, counting them to develop into some massive talent in the distant future. There are lots of other pros out there to choose from. Employers want to see what you can do now. A quote from Mark A. Nelson, the illustrator of Blood and Shadows by DC Comics. Prepare a portfolio that shows your strengths. Are you trying to be a penciler, an inker, or both? Show action and conversation in your work. Have photocopy samples that you can leave with the editor and keep doing new work. A quote from Mark A. Nelson, illustrator of Blood and Shadows of DC Comics. What do I do? Do the work. Before you can prepare your portfolio, you must first do the work. That may sound simplistic or obvious, but often professionals are approached by wannabes who assure them that they have work at home, or that the idea is all worked out. Ultimately, they have nothing concrete to show. You must have finished work before you can expect to interest an employer or get a professional critique. Only a well-established, proven professional can sell work on spec. Individuals just getting started need to prove themselves first, and that means doing the work. There are many ways to display your work depending on few factors. Some things to consider are your finances, size and weight of originals, value of originals, your choice of display method, type of work you do, etc. The list goes on and on. Make your own list, and once you have itemized the characteristics and limitations, then select the method you wish to use for display. Choose a portfolio type. As I mentioned earlier, there are a variety of portfolio types available. Using your list of characterizations and limitations, you should make a choice on which type of portfolio will best suit your needs. If you plan to travel to many shows and interviews, something very portable is best. If you will be flying, consider that it must meet the carry-on luggage requirements. Don't check your portfolio if you can avoid it. There's nothing worse than spending time and money to go to a show or interview looking for work, only to discover that you have no samples to show because Joe Winter's ski pole pierced and tore them, or that they've been rerouted on a tour of the Orient without you. Whoops. Got an interruption. I'll be right back. My daughter's Snuggle Mama alarm went off. Even when she's gone, I'm haunted. Coffee break. Make sure it's reasonably lightweight too. You'll have to haul it back and forth from car to home to hotel to airport, and through long, long airport concourses. Consider the display method too. Some people choose to display their work matted and shrink-wrapped. It works really great. It can be unwieldy. One of the easiest forms is the binder or portfolio case with plastic perforated pages, with sheets of black paper inside, providing a double-faced page, and a good black setting on which to display your work. It also adds protection. Most importantly, it makes perusal of your samples effortless, as simple as turning the pages of a book. If you can keep the overall dimensions down to 11 by 17 inches, that will make it even easier for an interested party to set it on the table in front of them or hold in their lap. And if they're not juggling those pages, struggling to protect their tabletop, or holding up an oversized portfolio, they'll be more inclined to spend some time examining your work. Make copies. Many people place great value on their creations, whether dollar or sentimental. and it only makes sense to protect that value by displaying copies of your work. If it's only a copy that is destroyed, damaged, or even, heaven forbid, but it happens, stolen, the cost and emotional trauma is much less than if it were the irreplaceable original. Copies can take a variety of forms. If you work in black and white, then a simple, inexpensive, and clean photocopy is suitable to display your work. Full 11 by 17 inch copies will easily hold a full-size page of comic art. Reductions to letter size, 8.5 by 11, will provide a more portable sample, and it will clearly show how the art will look in comic reproduction. Color copies are a little more complicated, but valuable if you want to pursue work as a colorist or for fully painted material. Just remember that professionals like to see the original drawings as well as the finished painted samples. To make color copies, you can use photography, expensive color printing, or, thanks to our ever-improving technology, color photocopies. These types of reproductions are a bit more expensive than the black and white. Costs vary depending on equipment availability and the economics of your area. Often, you can make an excellent quality color reproduction. However, sometimes the match is poor. In those cases, consider alternatives, because a poor sample makes you look bad, and apologies and explanations to the prospective employer do not improve their perception of the work. Just don't display bad samples. Display originals. If you're brave or your originals aren't too important to you, or you are continuously creating new work to replace the old, or you can't get a good reproduction, or time is very short, then feel free to display the original. However, there are a couple very important considerations here: portability and protection. If you like to work on a 4x4x3 3/8 masonite, then there's not much chance you can fit your work in a portfolio, let alone carry it around easily. Then again, because of this large size, your only reasonable source of copies would be a photograph. On the other hand, if you work on paper or Bristol that is 11 by 17 inches, or smaller, then you can very easily display the original art. It is lightweight and will easily fit on a standard display folder. A quote from Richard Chase, illustrator of Shade, the Changing Man by Vertigo. If you are first starting out, try and have some consistency in your artistic style. I've seen too many people bring a portfolio in that has a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of the other, showing that they can do all these different styles. But unfortunately, I can't really see the style that belongs to that individual. If I was an editor, I'd be more inclined to give someone work if they showed a consistent style or identity of their own. The same thing applies to writers. Don't mimic someone else's voice or writing style. A quote from Richard Chase, illustrator of Shade, the Changing Man from Vertigo. If you make the choice to display originals, then the most important thing to consider is protection, not just for you, but also for the recipient of your portfolio. Here's a scenario. You've approached a pro to check out your stuff. While looking at your unprotected work, a big, unexpected wet sneeze overcomes them. This isn't going to help your originals look better, and the inadvertent victim is going to feel like a jerk for damaging your work, and probably will be a bit resentful. I know, that sounds ridiculous, but guilt is an insidious thing. And they may feel that you put them on the spot to look at your work, and that your lack of professional presentation made them responsible for the damage. Some pros won't even examine unprotected originals for just this sort of reason. Spend a little extra time and a few dollars. Plastic page protectors are pretty inexpensive. At the very least, invest in them for your originals. Tear sheets and published work. There are some aspiring professionals who have managed to get something published. Sometimes it's not much. A small company might have published it, even one that is currently out of business. But published samples are an excellent inclusion in your portfolio. But only if they're good. If the published material is a far cry from your usual caliber of work, mention the credit in your resume or cover letter. But don't display the work unless the prospective employer asks specifically to see it. If the publisher did a hatchet job in reproducing your work, display it with good clean copies of the originals alongside, so that a comparison can be made. Published samples are very useful. They indicate a potential employer that you've made the effort to get work in the past and completed the assignment to that publisher's satisfaction. Granted, the experience may not have been a good one, with problems getting paid by the publisher, meeting your deadline, or even getting your original artwork returned. But it helps to provide the appearance of professionalism on your part. Make the best of a bad experience. Make it work to your benefit in the future. Your portfolio format. Now that you've decided what type of work to show, it's important that you carefully choose the format to display. For this section, I will use a standard book-style portfolio case with two-sided plastic pages. You can use a black paper insert to provide backing for the sample. Selecting work to display. The most important things to remember when choosing portfolio material is to always display your best work and most current work. I emphasize this point because without fail, at every show or appearance, pros are approached by numerous aspiring creators who qualify their work with, "This isn't my best stuff," or "This is older work, I'm much better now." My response is always a gentle, "Then why don't you display your best current stuff?" The reason is they generally don't have anything else. I've heard about a creator who got many of his jobs based on a portfolio that contained good work that he had done in high school, more than 10 years ago. He scored a few professional jobs based on the portfolio before word got around that he was unable to deliver that same quality work. The portfolio doesn't fool anyone anymore, and his new published credits aren't much of a selling point. Now he has a hard time getting work on his own merit. The second most important thing to remember is to never make excuses for your work. There is no excuse. No, really, there isn't. If your stuff is good, it's good, and you have a chance. If it isn't, then you won't get hired. Don't apologize or make excuses. Every pro has heard them a dozen times before in infinite variations. They didn't care about them before, and they don't care about them. I missed a page. And they don't care about them now. They only want to see what you've got to show them right this minute. Offer descriptions if you wish, or describe new work you're currently doing, but don't discredit the work you're displaying. You're just giving yourself bad PR, and it sounds really unprofessional. Your rule of thumb should be, let the work speak for itself. Choosing the amount of work to display. There is no set rule on what is too much or too little. Some creators are very quick and prolific and have a great deal of good work to choose from. Some are much slower and meticulous and have fewer pieces to show. Whether your case, make sure to select the best that you have to offer. Keep in mind portability when you are deciding how much work to display. As a guide, you should consider between 3 and 5 double-sided pages. This will allow you to show 6 to 10 of your best pieces of work. Feel free to increase that slightly, but don't go overboard. If all your work looks the same, a prospective employer is going to get tired of it after 10 to 12 pages. Determining the type of work to show. The type of work you actively seek should decide the type of work samples you display in your portfolio. If you're interested in superheroes, don't display funny animal work. If you're looking to work in the alternative, horror, or science fiction comics, then don't show superhero samples. The same holds true for which companies you approach. If you just love Marvel's characters, then don't show them samples featuring DC Comics characters. Big corporations consider employee loyalty an important attribute. If it appears, even superficially, that you could be tempted away by another company down the road, that will curb their interest. But more importantly, they want to see how you would handle their characters, since that's what they would be hiring you to draw. So tailor your portfolio to your audience. If you're attending a convention with representatives from more than one company you wish to approach, then feel free to mix and match your display. They will understand. On a related line, display the type of work you want to do. Don't show color samples if all you're interested in is penciling. Also, if you pencil well, but you like to ink your work. Though your inking needs practice, display a copy of the finished pencils alongside the finished inks. Give a potential employer the opportunity to hire you based on your abilities, not just your dreams. Who knows? They may hate your inks, but go nuts for your pencil work. I've seen it happen before. A quote from Paul Chadwick, artist and writer for Concrete from Dark Horse Comics. If you're pitching your own stories, have some completed comics to show. Nobody wants to see sketchbooks. Nobody wants to read proposals. They want a comic book story that can read in 5 minutes. Something my agent suggests to people is to plot out the first 100 pages of your saga, and then do an 8-page short story that gives a good idea of the story that will stand on its own. There's a logical tendency to start at the beginning, the origin of your character and so on, but such a story probably doesn't have the tone of the overall series. Get it professionally lettered so that it will look professional. If you're just inking or penciling work, there is the standard advice: full-size photographs, no more than 12 samples, drawn to the industry standard 10 by 15-inch image area. Inkers should have copies of the uninked pencils for comparison. I would add that a neatly typed cover sheet with your address and phone number on it is a good idea. You're going to leave these with people, so have plenty of copies made. Good luck. A quote from Paul Chadwick, artist and writer for Concrete of Dark Horse Comics. Your portfolio layout. Although there's no set layout, here is a good reasonable guide to get you started. Make sure you permanently mark your name, address, and phone number somewhere on your portfolio in case of loss or theft. I've been left with sketchbooks that were forgotten and had no ID inside. Fortunately, I tracked down the owner. We're not always that lucky. Start your first page with a striking piece of work. Psychologists have noticed a behavioral trait called the primacy recency effect, that people can remember easiest the first thing and most recent thing they've seen. Start and finish your portfolio with strong pieces. Chances are those pieces will be the ones the prospective employer remembers. It's also not a bad idea to have a business card or a small sign prominently featuring your name and phone number on that front page. Get that subconscious image planted in their mind. Try to find some form of organization for the interior pieces: chronological order, character groupings, color and black and white groupings, etc. This makes it a bit easier for the prospective employer to look through and remember. Try to finish with another really strong piece. You might want to include another card or sign with your name and phone number on it. Make sure they have clear, bold lettering on them. You want to be remembered. Little extras that can help. Now that we've got a professional portfolio all laid out and ready to go, there are a couple of things that you should seriously consider as a fixed part of that portfolio: sample sheets and business cards. Sample sheets. Sample sheets are reproductions of your artwork with your name, address, phone number included. They give you the opportunity to pass on a permanent copy of work from your portfolio to a prospective buyer. They are suitable for individuals who have examined your work and for those who do not have the time or won't be available when you're able to meet with them. And upcoming chapters will also discuss their use in contacting potential employers by mail. Artist sample sheets can take the form of photocopies, photographs, color copies, professionally printed pages and large cards, or good black and white copies on lightweight cardstock. For writers, some sheets are one form of a portfolio. Copies of scripted pages, prose work, or story proposals can be attached to your contact information and are ideal to leave with a prospective client. One thing to keep in mind for both artists and writers: make sure you have a good supply of sample sheets on hand. Don't use your last sheet only to discover that the next person you meet would have been an invaluable contact that you've missed out on. Frequently, you can get a price break on volume copying too. Business cards. No matter how unimportant business cards may seem to you, they are invaluable and fairly inexpensive for simple black and whites. Again, you can usually get a price break if you order larger amounts. Business cards are indispensable. Keep a few in your pockets, in a wallet or bag. Slip extras into your portfolio. Always keep them handy. If you meet a prospective employer or another professional, you speak volumes about your level of professionalism and business acumen if you say, "Oh, here's my card." Always hand a card to any prospect who looks at your portfolio. Include one when you hand out your sample sheets. For artists, use the business card as an opportunity to showcase your work. It's almost like a little billboard. People like to look at business card art. Make yours stand out, and they'll remember you. Writers, don't think it won't help you too. A good friend of mine, an aspiring prose writer, finally took my advice and had some really nice cards made up before attending a large convention. He was stunned by the response, and said he could kick himself for waiting so long. Make some excellent work connections, and even got a few lunch invites from editors. That's the end of chapter 1. I hope that you got some nuggets of knowledge from it. If you did, go ahead and comment either here or on Twitter. I'd love to hear it. If you've got some things that you found that are completely out of date or useless in modern comic book industry, I'd love to hear that. I came up with as I was reading, I was thinking of how some of those things don't work nowadays. Nowadays, we've got print on demand. So when she was talking about having photocopies of your work and samples of this and samples of that, I'm thinking, man, you can just, if you have a whole comic that you've drawn and that you've created, you can just spend like $10 and get yourself a copy of that comic and then have that in your portfolio for them to flip through. And it's just completely all done. For that, you have to make sure that you also include the information of whether it was a CMYK printer or an RGB printer, because that can change the output, the coloring, and everything like that. I'm going to go do some other things while I still have time, but thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye!